Think for a moment about the small signals your body sends you throughout the day. The slight hesitation before standing up. The need to hold something steady when stepping onto an uneven surface. The moment of searching for a word that used to come easily. These are not emergencies. They are quiet messages, easy to dismiss or simply accept as the cost of growing older. But what if these signals are not inevitable? What if they are not the natural toll of time, but rather the body's way of indicating that certain systems are not receiving what they need to maintain themselves? There is a difference between aging and declining, and that difference is not determined by years alone. It is determined by what the body is given to work with and what it is asked to do. This video is an inquiry into that difference. You are listening to the Longevity Library, where we archive the wisdom of healthy aging. Title: The Unfolding Years. A calm inquiry into lasting vitality. Introduction. There is a question that often arrives quietly, usually in the quiet hours of the morning or during a pause in the day. It is not a question of crisis, but one of gentle curiosity. It asks, how do I want these next decades to feel? Not how many years can be accumulated, but what quality will those years hold? Will the body feel like a willing partner in the day's plans? Or will it require increasing negotiation just to move from one room to the next? Will the mind feel clear and engaged? Or will it seem as though the sharp edges of thought have begun to soften and blur? These are not questions of vanity. They are questions of function. They touch upon the most fundamental aspects of human experience: the ability to walk without discomfort, to rise from a chair without assistance, to recall a memory without effort, to feel the ground beneath the feet with confidence. These simple capacities form the foundation of what is often called independence, though that word barely captures its true value. Independence is not merely the absence of help. It is the presence of capability. It is the freedom to move through life on one's own terms. The study of how the body changes across the decades has revealed something quietly encouraging. While the passage of time is inevitable, the rate at which the body declines is not fixed. It is not a straight line leading inevitably toward frailty. Instead, it is a path with many forks, and the choices made along the way appear to influence which direction the body takes. This is not a promise of endless youth, nor is it a claim that disease can simply be wished away. It is an observation, supported by a growing body of research, that the human body responds to its environment, its fuel, and its use in ways that can either accelerate or slow the visible signs of aging. This inquiry will explore the patterns that have emerged from studying those who age with grace and those who do not. It will look at the systems that matter most, the network of nerves that carry sensation from the feet to the brain, the vessels that deliver oxygen to every tissue, the bones that provide the frame, the joints that allow motion, and the mind that orchestrates it all. It will examine not only what supports these systems, but what silently undermines them. And it will do so not with the urgency of a warning, but with the calm attention of someone observing the natural world, noticing what flourishes and what fades, and asking simply, why? Part 1. The Architecture of Aging. To understand how to maintain function across the decades, it helps first to understand what is actually happening inside the body as the years pass. Aging is not one single process, but many. It is a collection of changes occurring simultaneously in different systems, each affecting the others in ways that are often invisible until the cumulative effect becomes impossible to ignore. Consider first the nervous system. This is the body's communication network, a vast web of cells that carries signals from the brain to every muscle and organ, and carries sensation back up to the brain. In the legs and feet, this network is responsible for the constant, unconscious stream of information that allows a person to stand upright, to adjust to uneven ground, to know where the body is in space without having to look. This is called proprioception, and it is one of the most overlooked aspects of mobility. With age, the peripheral nerves, the long extensions that reach into the limbs, can begin to lose their efficiency. The protective covering around them may thin. The tiny blood vessels that nourish them may become less effective. When this happens, the signals become weaker or distorted. The brain receives less clear information from the feet. The result is not always dramatic numbness. It can be subtle. A slight uncertainty when walking on carpet. A need to hold the railing on stairs that was not there before. A feeling that the ground feels different than it used to. These are signs that the conversation between the feet and the brain has become slightly muffled. At the same time, the circulatory system undergoes its own changes. Blood vessels are not passive pipes. They are living tissues that expand and contract in response to the body's needs. They have inner linings that must remain smooth and flexible to allow blood to flow freely. Over time, these linings can become stiffer. In some cases, they develop areas of thickening or narrowing. This is particularly significant in the legs, where the arteries must push blood against gravity back toward the heart. When circulation to the lower limbs diminishes, the muscles and nerves there receive less oxygen and fewer nutrients. They become more vulnerable to damage and less capable of repair. The skeletal system also changes. Bone is living tissue that constantly remodels itself, breaking down old cells and building new ones. For much of life, this process is balanced. But in later decades, the breakdown can begin to outpace the rebuilding. The bones become less dense, more porous. This does not necessarily cause pain, but it does mean that a fall which might once have resulted in a bruise can now result in a fracture. And a fracture, particularly of the hip, is one of the most common events that marks the transition from independent living to reliance on others. Joints, the places where bones meet, face their own challenges. The cartilage that cushions these connections can wear thin. The fluid that lubricates the joint can become less effective. The result is often stiffness and discomfort, particularly after periods of inactivity. This can create a cycle. Movement becomes uncomfortable, so the person moves less. Moving less leads to weaker muscles, which puts more strain on the joints, which makes movement even more uncomfortable. And throughout all of this, the metabolic system, the way the body processes fuel from food, plays a central role. How the body handles sugars and fats affects every other system. Consistently high levels of sugar in the blood, for example, can damage the delicate linings of blood vessels and contribute to the degradation of nerve tissue. This is not a matter of diabetes alone. Even levels that are not high enough to warrant a diagnosis can, over years, exert a slow, cumulative effect. What becomes clear when looking at these systems together is that they do not operate in isolation. The health of the blood vessels affects the health of the nerves. The health of the nerves affects balance and mobility. Mobility affects bone density and joint health. Metabolic health affects all of them. The body is not a collection of separate parts, but a single integrated system. And the goal of maintaining function across the decades is to support that system as a whole. Part 2. The fuel that builds and repairs. If the body is understood as a system that is constantly repairing and maintaining itself, then the question of what materials it has available for that work becomes central. The body cannot create something from nothing. It can only work with what it is given. The foods that are eaten are not merely fuel for energy. They are the raw materials for every repair, every replacement cell, every chemical signal that regulates function. This is where the concept of nourishment takes on a deeper meaning than simply avoiding hunger or managing weight. It becomes about providing the specific components that the aging body needs most. And research into populations that maintain function well into later decades has revealed certain patterns in what they eat and what they avoid. Consider first the needs of the nervous system. The nerves, particularly the long ones extending into the legs, require specific nutrients to maintain their structure and function. Among the most important are the B vitamins, particularly folate. This nutrient is involved in the maintenance of nerve tissue and the repair of the small damages that occur through normal use. It is also involved in regulating levels of a compound called homocysteine, which, when elevated, is associated with increased risk of damage to blood vessels and nerves. Folate helps keep this compound in check. Foods rich in folate tend to be the deep green leafy vegetables: spinach, collard greens, kale. These are not exotic or difficult to find. They are humble, ordinary foods that have been part of human diets for centuries. What makes them particularly valuable for the aging body is not just their folate content, but the constellation of other nutrients they provide. Magnesium, for example, is abundant in these same greens. Magnesium is involved in hundreds of biochemical reactions in the body, including those that help blood vessels relax and maintain healthy blood pressure. For the legs, this means better circulation. For the nerves, it means a more reliable supply of oxygen and nutrients. The deep green color of these vegetables comes from pigments called carotenoids, including lutein and zeaxanthin. These compounds are known for their role in protecting the eyes, but they also act as antioxidants throughout the body, helping to neutralize the reactive molecules that can damage cells. In this sense, a serving of cooked greens is not just a source of vitamins and minerals. It is a delivery system for a wide range of protective compounds that work together in ways that are difficult to replicate in isolation. Then there is the question of fats. For much of recent history, dietary fat was portrayed as something to minimize. But a more nuanced understanding has emerged. The body needs certain fats to build and maintain its cells. The brain, in particular, is composed largely of fat, and the specific types of fat available to it influence how well it functions. The omega-3 fatty acids, found abundantly in cold water fish like salmon, sardines, and mackerel, are incorporated directly into the membranes of brain cells. They affect the fluidity of those membranes and the efficiency with which signals pass between cells. Populations with high consumption of these fatty fish have been observed to maintain cognitive function longer. This does not mean that fish is a magic bullet for memory, but rather that the brain, like every other organ, requires specific building materials to maintain its structure. Without adequate omega-3s, the brain must use whatever fats are available, which may not be optimal for long-term function. These same fats also influence inflammation throughout the body. Inflammation is a natural and necessary process, the body's response to injury or threat. But when inflammation becomes chronic, low-grade, and persistent, it can begin to damage healthy tissues. This is particularly relevant in the joints, where inflammatory processes can accelerate the breakdown of cartilage. Omega-3s help regulate the inflammatory response, keeping it from becoming excessive or prolonged. For this reason, regular consumption of fatty fish has been associated with lower rates of joint stiffness and discomfort. Equally important are the pigments that give fruits and vegetables their colors. The deep blue of blueberries, the red of raspberries, the purple of plums. These colors come from compounds called anthocyanins. These molecules are produced by plants to protect themselves from environmental stress, and when consumed by humans, they appear to offer similar protective effects. They are particularly effective at supporting the health of blood vessels. Research has observed that regular consumption of berries is associated with better blood pressure regulation and reduced stiffness of the arteries. For the legs and feet, this vascular protection is critical. The smallest blood vessels, the capillaries, are where oxygen and nutrients are actually delivered to tissues. These tiny vessels are fragile and can be damaged by the same processes that affect larger arteries. By supporting the health of the entire vascular system, the compounds in berries help ensure that the feet and legs receive the circulation they need to stay resilient. What emerges from looking at these foods is not a list of exotic superfoods, but a pattern of eating that emphasizes variety, color, and whole foods. The vegetables, the fish, the berries, these are not treatments for specific diseases. They are the raw materials for maintenance. They provide the body with what it needs to perform its endless task of repair. Part 3. What undermines the system? If certain foods provide the materials for repair, then it follows that other foods might interfere with that process or even cause additional damage. This is not a matter of moral judgment about food, but a practical observation about how the body responds to different substances. Just as a carpenter cannot build a sturdy house with rotten wood, the body cannot maintain healthy tissues when the materials it receives are actively harmful. Consider the category of foods that are high in refined sugars and easily digestible carbohydrates. These are not just the obvious sweets like candy and pastries, but also many processed foods that contain added sugars in forms that are not always recognized. When these foods are consumed, they cause a rapid rise in blood sugar. The body responds by releasing insulin to move that sugar into cells. Over time, repeated spikes in blood sugar and insulin can lead to a condition where cells become less responsive to insulin's signal, requiring more and more of the hormone to achieve the same effect. This matters for aging because elevated blood sugar, even at levels that do not meet the definition of diabetes, has a direct effect on the small blood vessels. The excess sugar molecules can bind to proteins in the vessel walls, forming compounds that make the vessels stiff and less functional. This process, called glycation, is one of the mechanisms by which high-sugar diets accelerate the aging of the cardiovascular system. The vessels most affected are often the smallest ones, including those that nourish the peripheral nerves. Over years, this can contribute to the gradual loss of sensation in the feet. There is also the matter of what these sugary foods displace. When a significant portion of the diet consists of refined carbohydrates and added sugars, there is less room for the foods that provide the nutrients the body needs for repair. The body may be receiving plenty of calories, but it is starved for the specific compounds it requires to maintain nerve tissue, strengthen blood vessels, and regulate inflammation. Another category of concern is processed meats, bacon, ham, sausages, and similar products. These foods are preserved with compounds called nitrates and nitrites. While these compounds occur naturally in some vegetables, in the context of processed meats, they are associated with effects on blood vessels that are not beneficial. Research has observed that higher consumption of these meats is linked to greater stiffness of the arteries and higher rates of peripheral artery disease, the condition in which blood flow to the legs is reduced. The mechanism appears to involve both the direct effects of the preservatives and the high levels of sodium and saturated fat that typically accompany these products. For the legs, this combination is particularly problematic. Narrowed arteries mean less oxygen reaches the muscles during activity, leading to cramping and pain. Over time, the reduced blood flow leaves the tissues vulnerable to damage and slow to heal. Then there is the issue of how foods are prepared. Frying, particularly the industrial frying used for many convenience foods, introduces compounds that the body struggles to process. When starchy foods like potatoes are cooked at very high temperatures, a compound called acrylamide forms. This substance has been shown in laboratory studies to have effects on nerve cells. While the levels in food are much lower than those used in experiments, the principle of cumulative exposure over years is worth considering. The oils used for frying, especially when reused multiple times as is common in commercial settings, can become sources of trans fats. These artificially created fats are known to promote inflammation and contribute to arterial stiffness. They have no nutritional value and offer no benefit to the body. Their presence in the diet is purely a matter of convenience and palatability, not nourishment. What ties these various categories together is a common theme. They all introduce substances that the body must process and defend against, without providing the compounds needed for maintenance. They create metabolic work without providing the tools to do it. Over time, this imbalance between stress and repair is what drives the gradual decline that is often mistaken for inevitable aging. Part 4. Movement as maintenance. If food provides the materials for repair, then movement provides the signal that repair is needed. This is a fundamental principle of how the body maintains itself. Tissues that are not used are gradually dismantled. Muscles that are not challenged become weaker. Bones that are not stressed lose density. Joints that are not moved through their full range become stiff. The body is efficient to a fault. It does not waste resources maintaining what it does not use. This is why a sedentary lifestyle is so damaging, not because of what it does, but because of what it fails to do. Without the stimulus of movement, the body receives no message that muscle strength is required. That bone density must be preserved. That balance must be practiced. The slow loss of function that follows is not a disease. It is simply the body's response to a lack of demand. For the legs, this is particularly significant. The muscles of the lower body are among the largest in the body, and they require regular use to remain strong. Walking, climbing stairs, rising from a chair, these are not just activities. They are signals. Each time the leg muscles are asked to generate force, they respond by maintaining their structure. Each time they are not asked, they begin the slow process of atrophy. Balance is similarly use-dependent. The complex system that keeps a person upright involves input from the eyes, the inner ear, and the sensors in the muscles and joints. This system must be constantly calibrated through use. When a person walks on uneven ground, the brain receives streams of information about the position of the body and makes tiny adjustments to maintain stability. When movement is limited to smooth, predictable surfaces, this calibration is not practiced, and the system becomes less responsive. This is why activities that challenge balance, even slightly, are valuable. Standing on one foot while brushing teeth, walking heel to toe for a few steps, rising from a chair without using the hands, these are not exercises in the conventional sense. They are maintenance tasks. They remind the body that balance matters, that stability is required, that the systems responsible for preventing falls must remain operational. Flexibility follows the same principle. Joints are designed to move through ranges of motion. When they are not moved through those ranges regularly, the soft tissues around them shorten and tighten. This creates a cycle where movement becomes more difficult, which leads to less movement, which leads to more tightening. The way to interrupt this cycle is not through intense stretching, but through regular, gentle movement that takes the joints through their full available range. This might mean rotating the ankles each morning, reaching the arms overhead, turning the torso from side to side. These are not workouts. They are lubrication. The evidence from populations that remain mobile into later decades suggests that the key is not a specific exercise program, but an overall pattern of remaining in motion. People in these populations do not necessarily go to gyms. They walk as part of daily life. They garden. They climb stairs. They carry their own groceries. They do not compartmentalize movement into a separate part of the day. It is simply woven into the fabric of living. For those whose lives have become more sedentary, reintroducing movement does not require a dramatic overhaul. It requires only the recognition that every bit of movement counts. A short walk after a meal. A few minutes of standing instead of sitting. Choosing the stairs for one flight. These are not insignificant. They are signals, and the body responds to signals. Part 5. The role of rest and recovery. In the discussion of movement, it is easy to overlook its necessary partner, rest. The body does not repair itself during activity. It repairs itself during the periods of rest that follow. This is when the materials provided by food are actually used to rebuild and strengthen. This is when the benefits of movement are consolidated. Sleep is the most profound form of rest, and its importance for aging is difficult to overstate. During deep sleep, the body engages in housekeeping functions that are not possible during waking hours. Cellular repair processes are activated. Waste products accumulated during the day are cleared from the brain. Hormones involved in tissue repair are released. Memory is consolidated. For older adults, sleep often becomes more fragmented and less deep. This is partly a natural change, but it can also be influenced by habits and environment. The consistency of sleep schedule matters. Exposure to light, particularly the blue light from screens in the evening, can interfere with the body's natural preparation for sleep. The timing of meals and the consumption of stimulants like caffeine can also play a role. Beyond sleep, there is the concept of rest between efforts. When muscles are challenged through activity, they develop microscopic damage that must be repaired. This repair process is what leads to strength gains, but it requires time. This is why alternating days of more demanding activity with days of lighter movement is a common pattern among those who remain strong. It allows the repair process to complete before the next challenge. Rest also applies to the nervous system. Constant stimulation, constant engagement, constant reaction to the demands of the day can leave the nervous system in a state of low-grade activation. This chronic alertness consumes energy and contributes to the feeling of being worn out without having done anything physically demanding. Periods of quiet, of doing nothing in particular, allow the nervous system to settle. This is not laziness. It is recalibration. The balance between movement and rest is different for everyone. There is no single formula, but the principle is universal. The body requires both stimulus and recovery. Without stimulus, it weakens. Without recovery, it breaks down. Part 6. Connection and continuity. There is a dimension of aging that is often discussed in terms of emotion or psychology, but which has observable effects on physical health. This is the realm of social connection, purpose, and engagement. The evidence here is remarkably consistent. People who remain connected to others, who have reasons to wake up in the morning, who feel that their lives have meaning, tend to maintain function longer than those who become isolated and disengaged. The mechanisms are not mystical. They are practical. A person who has social engagements is more likely to leave the house, to walk, to move. A person who feels needed by others has a reason to maintain their health. A person who is engaged in activities they find meaningful experiences lower levels of chronic stress, which in turn reduces the inflammatory load on the body. Loneliness, by contrast, appears to have direct physiological effects. It is associated with higher levels of stress hormones, higher blood pressure, and greater systemic inflammation. These are not just feelings. They are measurable changes in the body's chemistry. Over years, these changes take a toll on the same systems discussed earlier: the blood vessels, the nerves, the immune function. This does not mean that everyone must be surrounded by people at all times. Solitude is different from loneliness, and many people find deep satisfaction in time alone. The key is the presence of meaningful connection, whether that is with family, friends, a community group, or even a beloved pet. The content of the connection matters less than its reality. There is also the matter of purpose. which can exist independently of other people. Purpose might be found in creative work, in learning, in caring for a garden, in contributing to a cause. What matters is that it provides a reason to continue engaging with the world. It answers the question, why get up in the morning? For those who have retired from careers, finding new sources of purpose can be as important for health as any dietary change. The populations known for high rates of healthy aging often have cultures that naturally support this. Older adults remain integrated into community life. They are not segregated into separate facilities. They have roles and responsibilities. They are valued for their experience. This social architecture may be as important as any specific food or exercise. Part 7. The environment we create. Much of the discussion of aging focuses on individual choices. What to eat, how to move, when to rest. But these choices are always made within an environment that either supports or undermines them. The physical surroundings in which a person lives have a profound effect on what is possible and what is convenient. Consider the simple matter of walking. A neighborhood with sidewalks, safe crossings, and destinations within walking distance encourages movement. A neighborhood without these things makes walking a project rather than a natural part of the day. The same person will move very differently in these two environments. The environment shapes behavior, often without the person even noticing. Similarly, the availability of fresh food matters. A person living in an area with farmers markets and well-stocked grocery stores has an easier time obtaining vegetables and fish than someone living in a food desert where the only options are processed and packaged. This is not a matter of willpower. It is a matter of what is actually available. Inside the home, small modifications can have large effects. Good lighting reduces fall risk. Handrails on stairs provide security. A chair that is easy to rise from encourages getting up and down rather than remaining seated. These are not medical interventions. They are adjustments that align the environment with the capabilities of an aging body. The social environment also plays a role. A person whose family and friends value healthy habits is more likely to maintain them. A person surrounded by people who encourage sedentary behavior and rich food faces a constant headwind. Humans are social creatures. We tend to match the behavior of those around us, often unconsciously. This is not to say that individuals are helpless victims of their environment, but recognizing the power of surroundings allows for intentional choices. It may mean seeking out a walking group to create social support for movement. It may mean rearranging the kitchen to make healthy foods more visible and processed foods less accessible. It may mean investing in better lighting or removing tripping hazards. These are not dramatic changes, but they shift the odds in favor of the behaviors that support long-term function. Part 8. The cumulative nature of change. One of the most common obstacles to adopting healthier patterns is the expectation of immediate results. When change does not produce a dramatic effect within days or weeks, it is easy to conclude that it is not working. This misunderstands how the body works. The processes that lead to decline are slow and cumulative. A single day of poor eating does not cause arterial stiffness. A single day of sedentary behavior does not cause muscle atrophy. These things happen over years, through thousands of small choices that gradually shift the body's trajectory. By the same logic, a single day of healthy eating does not reverse that damage. It is the accumulation of days that matters. This can feel discouraging, but it is actually liberating. It means that no single meal is decisive. No single missed walk ruins everything. What matters is the overall pattern, the general direction. A person who eats well most of the time, moves most days, and rests when needed is on a favorable trajectory, even if they occasionally deviate. It also means that it is never too late to shift that trajectory. The body retains its capacity to respond to positive signals, even after years of less optimal patterns. Muscle tissue can be rebuilt. Blood vessels can become more flexible. Balance can be improved. These changes do not happen overnight, but they can happen. The body is designed for resilience. It wants to maintain itself. It simply needs the right materials and signals. This is perhaps the most hopeful observation from the study of aging. While the passage of time is irreversible, the rate of decline is not fixed. It is influenced by countless small factors, each within reach. The choice to eat an extra serving of vegetables today, to take a short walk, to stand up and stretch, to call a friend, these are not trivial. They are the individual threads that, woven together over time, create the fabric of how a person ages. Part 9. A coherent approach. If there is a single principle that emerges from looking at all of these factors together, it is that the body responds best to a coherent approach. Isolated interventions a supplement here. A brief exercise there are less effective than an overall pattern that supports the systems in an integrated way. This is because the body itself is integrated. The health of the blood vessels affects the nerves. The health of the nerves affects balance. Balance affects the willingness to move. Movement affects muscle strength and bone density. Strength affects the ability to stay engaged with life. Engagement affects mood and purpose. Purpose affects the motivation to eat well and move. It is all connected. A coherent approach recognizes these connections. It does not treat nutrition as separate from movement, or movement as separate from rest, or rest as separate from social connection. It sees them as aspects of a single whole, each supporting the others. The person who eats well has more energy for movement. The person who moves sleeps better. The person who sleeps well has clearer thinking. The person who thinks clearly makes better choices about food. The cycle can be virtuous or vicious. The goal is to tip it toward the virtuous direction. This approach does not require perfection. It does not require a complete overhaul of life all at once. It requires only the recognition that small changes, consistently applied, accumulate. It requires the patience to trust the process even when results are not immediately visible. It requires the humility to accept that the body has its own timeline for repair, and that timeline cannot be rushed. For those in the later decades of life, this approach offers something valuable, a sense of agency. While no one can control all the factors that influence aging, genetics plays a role, and chance plays a role, there is still a wide zone of influence. Within that zone, choices matter. They matter not because they guarantee any particular outcome, but because they shift the probabilities in a favorable direction. They stack the deck. Conclusion. The inquiry into how the body changes across the decades reveals no single secret. No magic formula. No intervention that guarantees a long and vigorous life. What it reveals instead is a pattern. Those who maintain function into later years tend to eat foods that provide the raw materials for repair. They tend to move in ways that signal to the body that strength and balance are required. They tend to rest enough to allow repair to occur. They tend to remain connected to others and engaged with life. They tend to live in environments that make these things easier rather than harder. None of this is dramatic. None of it makes for a startling headline. It is simply the accumulated wisdom of observing how the human body responds to the conditions in which it is placed. The body is remarkably adaptable. It does the best it can with what it is given. When it is given materials for repair, it repairs. When it is given signals to maintain strength, it maintains strength. When it is given reasons to stay engaged, it stays engaged. This is not a promise of immortality or even of freedom from all the challenges of aging. Those challenges are real, and they will come in their own time, in their own way. But the character of those years, how they feel, what is possible, how much of life remains accessible is not fixed in advance. It is written day by day, choice by choice. meal by meal, step by step. The body that carries a person through life deserves attention, not because it is the most important thing, but because it is the vehicle for everything else. It is what allows a walk in the woods, a conversation with a grandchild, the simple pleasure of rising in the morning and moving into the day. To care for it is not vanity. It is gratitude. It is recognition that this vehicle, for all its limitations, is the only one available. And it is capable, with the right support, of continuing the journey for a very long time. The body that carries you through life asks for no miracles. It asks only for what it has always needed: materials to repair itself, signals to maintain its strength, rest to consolidate its gains, and reasons to remain engaged with the world. These are not complicated requests, but they are cumulative. They build upon one another, day after day, year after year, shaping not how many years you accumulate, but what those years feel like. If this reflection has stirred something in you, we invite you to share your thoughts in the comments. What has your body been telling you? And what have you learned about listening to it? And if you would like to continue this exploration, the Longevity Library holds many more volumes. We hope you will return to read them. This is the Longevity Library. Listen, learn, and live longer.